So what we're going to do is for nCloth. Last week we kind of talked about it, we played with it. But in this instance, I just want to do a quick overview because it doesn't take long. So what I want to do is I want to start off with, just a plane. And the plane is going to act as the actual cloth itself. Okay, and this doesn't have to be precise or anything like that. This is just a huge reference that we're going to use. One thing we do know, however, is that we want to put some subdivisions into this, because if we don't, it won't give it a nice sway to it. So I'm going to put 50 and 50, which is quite a bit. Okay, and I'm just going to round it off my scale. I'm going to hit 15, 7, and 7, or 5 and 1. 5 and 5, just something easy. Okay, I'm going to rotate this. To rotate, R, you hold J, and it will snap. Okay, so we end up with this pretty long item here. A lot of detail going on here. So this would be just kind of like a drape, just hanging out, not doing much. There's different patterns and stuff I can do, but for right now we'll just make this work. So now what I need to do is I need to create some type of base that I can hang off of, right? So one thing I did was, I know last week I went in, grabbed some vertices at the very top. Let's grab, the first 3 rows. I'm just going to rotate them just a little bit here. Grab the next 2, kind of do the same thing. And all it does is just creates a curve for me. Just a simple curve. Now what I want to do is I want to put something in between here. So a cylinder works well. If I also want to, I can go ahead and move them accordingly as well. That's the nice thing about working with polygons and working with the subdivisions and the sub-object stuff, is that we can move things around. Alright, so let's create a base. Go with cylinder. Okay, cylinder is going to create at the very bottom here. And right now it's pretty big. So I'm just going to rotate this. Hold J to make sure I can snap it 90 degrees. And then from here, I'm just going to use my scale and just scale it out. Okay, this is fine. Alright, so here I'm just going to grab the cloth now. I'm just going to kind of wrap it around here. So when I actually apply the nCloth and everything, it'll actually should kind of snap onto this object. So I'm just going to help it calculate just a little. So that way it kind of gives me the form I'm looking for. Alright, so one thing I think we noticed is that if I was to leave everything as is, a lot of the pull would pull from these vertices here on each edge. And so what I want to do is I want to refine this a little. So I'm just going to add a swift loop on the edges. Right where the cloth meets the plane here. Alright, now the big thing. So we first want to create an nCloth, right? So to create an nCloth, how do I go about that? Who remembers? Right. So right away I'm in my modeling menu. So what I need to do is I need to switch that to the FX. And then we're looking for nCloth. And we're going to create an nCloth. Now from here, if I was just to hit play, what will happen to my cloth? Yeah, it just should fall to the floor. So if I hit play, it's just going to fall. So I don't want that. Actually, I want it to stay up here at the very top. So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab these vertices up here at the top. And if you want to do in the side profile, it's probably a lot easier. Right here. Okay, now from here, what we want to do is we want to select the object that we're constraining to, right? So I'm going to shift click the cylinder. And so I'm going to go in constraint. And what do we want here? We want constraint or component to component. So if I hit component, it's going to give me a warning. And it says that it wants me to select one nCloth and one component. So instead, what I want to do is component to component. What that's going to do is it should now tie that object based off of where those segments and vertices are for my shape there. So you can see that it creates kind of this nice drooping look. And if I wanted it to be a little more precise, I might add more detail here or maybe here. So let me Control Z so I can show you what I mean. Okay, so I'm going to create a couple more cuts here. So just to prove that by adding more detail right here on this cylinder, that's going to help with the overall shape of the object. Okay, so I'm going to select the plane again, or the cloth. Go to the vertex, select these 3 rows of vertices. Again, hold Shift. Click on the cylinder, and I'm going to go constraint, component to component. And so now if I hit play again, you can see I get a pretty nice drop there. So I might keep this right here. So it gives us the folds. Now, the only thing it needs is some wind. So if I want to apply wind, I think last week we figured out you had to select the cloth. You go over to your attribute editor. And what we're looking for is we're looking for the nCloth. And we're looking for the wind modifier, correct? So there's my drop off, there's constraint. It's this one here, right? It's under nucleus. Okay, so nCloth shape, and we're looking for wind field generator. Okay, so go to dynamic properties, and we want to adjust the local wind. So if I do it on X, so it's X, Y, Z. So let's type in 50 to start off with. So if I scrum it real quick, you can see that's pretty wild, huh? So let's drop this down to 15. Okay, nice small gust. So now it kind of gives me a freer flapping wind to it. So if I was going to put this on the window, maybe drop it down to 5. That 15 might be too much, or maybe 2. I want just a little gust, right? Maybe something, I don't know. Maybe something there. Let's say, you know, great. That's what I want. So to lock this in, all I have to do then is go ahead and edit, delete by type, and history. So now you can see as I scrum, it's locked in now. I could probably get rid of the ink constraint and all that as well. So delete by type, and that at least gives me this shape here. Now if I want to manipulate that a little more, we can use soft selection, right? So let's say I want to rotate soft selection. I'm going to select some vertices here. You can see that I still have the one selected from earlier, so you can see I can kind of create some additive detail to there real quickly. Okay, I can also do this not only to vertices, but I can do it to edges as well. Maybe do this the bottom one pulls back a little. Maybe I got a little too happy. So that's kind of a nice thing about utilizing these tools, you know, soft selection, nCloth. You can create a kind of a cool dynamic look to it. So if I turn that off, actually I do need to make sure my soft selection is turned off. Get rid of the wireframes. So you can see it gives me a cool looking, almost clothy. I mean, again, this might be a little too big, but that's okay. If I delete the cylinder, you can see it keeps its shape there. So that's kind of the nice thing about using cloths if we're trying to create something that's, you know, looks kind of natural. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create a rope. We're only going to use a couple things though. I'm going to use a spline and I'm going to use a cylinder, and that's it. So the spline theoretically can be any shape you want. So let me grab all this stuff and let me hide it real quick here. Put it on its own layer, and this will be for my cloth. And I'll make sure that's okay. Make sure I turn that off so it's no longer visible. Alright, so first things first is I'm going to go into my top viewport here. And typically when we're doing splines, we always want to do it in our two-dimensional. So we do it in top, in front, or left, never perspective. So here what I want to do is, in the past when I use my EP tool, or if I use my CV tool, when I'm doing curves, I typically will make it linear. In this instance, though, I want some kind of a weird shape. So let's use the EP tool. I want to make sure I go in my settings, reset those, make sure it's at default of 3 cubics and uniformed. And I'm just going to create just a simple pattern for right now. So all of this is just clicking until I get a nice shape I want. Okay, it doesn't matter how many points you have here. That's kind of irrelevant. Okay, that's good enough for me. So it kind of creates like a little S shape to it, right? And I'm done now. So we're almost there. So now what I want to do is I want to create a cylinder. So creating a shape or a spline shape Again, it's whatever you want. It doesn't have to be perfect or anything. It's just a shape for right now. It can be a straight line if you like. Next, what I want to do is I want to create a cylinder. And all I did was I held Shift, right-clicked, and went to cylinder. Okay. From here, with the cylinder selected, I'm going to hit cylinder 1, the input. And I think I'm okay. Actually, you know what? For the caps, I'm going to put 2 for my caps right now. So everything else is, so it's 1, 2, 20 for my sides. I could put 10 if I wanted to, but it doesn't look right. So I'm going to put 20 back, the default. I'm going to put 1 for my height and then 2 for my subdivision caps. Okay, from here I'm going to right click, go to face. I'm going to select the top and the bottom of that, hit delete. So it leaves me with just this shape. Alright, so the problem is with this is that where's our pivot at? Pivot's at the bottom, huh? So what I need to do is I need to figure out a quickest way to get that pivot from where it was to the center. So a quick way would be selecting the object, going to modify, and then going to center pivot, right? So that's one way. The other way is holding D, holding X, and snapping it, well, okay, so holding D and holding V, not X. And now snap it too. So those are 2 ways to create a pivot point quickly. Alright, so from here, what I want to do is go into my top viewport here. I want to make a copy of this. So how do I make copies? So, yep, Control D. So we're making a total of 4. Okay, Control D, select 1, and then Control D to select all of them. So once I have that, I should have a total of 4. Now I have mine snapped based off of the grid, or not snapped by the grid, but I'm using the grid lines to figure out where to put these to make sure they line up accordingly. They don't have to touch, but it helps if they touch. So once I have this, what I want to do is I want to combine them. So with all 4 of them selected, I want to make sure that my modeling set is turned on. So that is F2 on your keyboard. And we're going to go over to, now I want to make sure I hit combined, right? So I'm going to go mesh, combined. What's nice is because I set my pivot point to the center of that cylinder, or to the cylinder face, when I combine them all, you can see that it created my pivot point right where I want it. So it kind of adjusted my pivot point for me, which is great. Alright, so now that I have it, so again, it's select all 4 of them. And I'm going to go to Mesh, Combined, and as long as my pivot point's in the center, then I'm good. So now what I want to do is, I'm going to rotate this. So I'm going to hit R, I'm going to hold J to make sure I'm rotating 90 degrees. And from here, what I want to do is I want to make sure that's right here on the edge of this object here, right? So I want this to match up with this. I might come in here and adjust this so it's straight. No, I just moved it naturally. So I actually didn't snap. Yes, you could. Okay, so if I was going to do that, right? So this is a spline. So if we look up here under our snap types, we have snap to grid, snap to curve, snap to point, and then snap to projected center, and then we have snap to view planes. So if I snap to vertex, so if I hold V, right? If I hold V and snap it, it doesn't really work, does it? Because this is not a vertex. What is this? It's a spline, right? So if I hit C, again, doesn't snap. Well, why is that? Anybody tell me? Well, the issue is because this is not an actual shape, right? It's just a spline. So it doesn't have segments, it doesn't have vertices or faces. What about the other tool we were playing with? Does anybody remember what that was called? Remember the one where we can select a face and align it to another one? So this one right here. So snap together tool. We also have the alignment tool and align objects tool. So if I snap together, right? You can see that if I do that, what does it do for me? So let me do it one more time. Okay, so I'm going to go to modify, go to snap tool together, or excuse me, snap together tool, turn that on, and what I want to do is I want to click on, so I'm clicking and dragging right now, right? So when I click and drag, it's telling me where the alignment is. So I want it to point at the edge. Once I release, oh, hold on, perspective is everything. Try that again. So modify, snap together tool. I'm going to click on this. So right there, I released it so I can see that my point is pointing towards me. And then I'm going to click on this object here. So what it's going to do is saying, okay, well, this spline is going to move to the center of this object now. Once I see that, I hit enter, and it moves the spline to the object. I can do it the other way too, right? I can do it to where the pivot point of the object goes to the spline. Either one doesn't matter. However, what's the problem? It's not really lined up, right? So I can just kind of visually get it close enough. So once I have this, I'm going to just scale these pretty small. Let's say like that. Also, what it did to my spline, it moved it too. So I don't know if I like that at all, right? This is probably not ideal. I might just manually move it rather than using that tool. That's just me though. Okay, so from here I'm just going to scale it low, real small. Maybe a little smaller. Now, something I like to do, sometimes I like to zero out my history, but for right now, I'm not going to worry about that. So with this selected, I'm going to hold Shift. I'm going to select the spline. Okay, so the hypothesis was that the line was too long, right? So that's at least our theory here. Let's find out. So same process, nothing changed. I created a new spline, new set of 4 cylinders. I went ahead and combined them. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. I'm going to snap this to the grid. Okay, so from here, I'm going to scale it down pretty small, just like I did before. I'm going to rotate it so it matches the line itself. See if we can get it a little more straight. Cool. Okay, so before I did not select the face, so I'm going to select the face this time. I'm going to hold Shift, select the actual spline, and from here it is Mesh, or Edit Mesh, and we're going to go ahead and extrude. So I'm going to hit Control E. And so visually we can see that it's trying to reach the other side, right? So from here, all I have to do is just add subdivisions. Okay, so I add 50 or more, let's say 100. Gives me my shape, but you can see it kind of looks more like a lizard tail than anything, right? So I want to bring up the taper and I want to twist this. So I'm going to hit W for my move tool and come over here to the actual input settings. And so under twist and taper, we can see that I can taper it. So taper it at 1. I'll make sure it's the same size all the way around. And then the twist, I can say, you know, 720, let's say, or 1080. And you can see it twists the actual shape. So I'd probably want this pretty crazy, right? 5,000. There you go. And you can see it kind of gives me a twist, but because of all these are the limited segments, if I increase this from 100 to 1,000, we can see that we get a nice clean kind of rope almost. Now the issue here is that my normals are faced, are facing inward. So I need to go to face, select all the faces, and then go to surface. Mesh display and reverse. Okay, if I do it right, that's what it looks like. So then that works with the actual, shape itself. So if I move this the line, what happens to my shape? It follows it, right? So if I start changing my points of that shape, here, let's do this. So let's say I grab this one, I'm going to move it up. You can see I can start manipulating the actual curve itself. So the trick is trying to find the points now. So I probably would want to put the actual mesh itself on its own layer. And I'm just going to go ahead and make it a reference so I don't select it. I'm just selecting the curve now. So now I can kind of field where these are at. So let's hide that. So let's grab these two here and turn the layer back on. I'm going to lift these up now. You can see now, look at that. So now I can shape this to fit on anything and really tweak this. So that's kind of nice. The only issue is this issue right here, right? Where it looks like it's grabbing. So I just have to be cognitive of kind of that in itself. It's probably because this is not long enough, maybe? Let's see. Yeah, I might want to tuck this or hide it or something, because those faces are attached to it. So, but besides that, everything else I can kind of manipulate and move on my own. So if I bring back the cloth, I can almost make this whole thing probably sit on it up here somewhere. So let's see if I can wrap this around. Grab these right here, push them out so they're kind of in the front. Maybe grab this so it's not so long. Grab this vertex. I think we're good there. So let's see what happens when I turn it on. So if I turn back my rope, we can see now the rope is flipped. It's normal. So if that happens, just select the faces. Go ahead and just mesh display reverse. And there you go. So now I have this object. Oof. Yeah, it really wants to stay here in the center, doesn't it? So that's always looks like it's always going to be at 0, 0, 0. You know, I think what I can probably do is if I delete these faces down here, I'm wondering if it would still follow it. So let's see. So we're going to make that a template. I'm just going to grab these points and push them out. Just see if it actually moves along with it. And there you go. So that's how kind of we can utilize and manipulate to create different looks. And obviously once you're satisfied, then you can leave it there. I typically would like to leave the curve there so I can then manipulate it as needed.